You are listening to Women's Running Stories, where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
My name is Mikka Kei Macdonald. My first name is Mikka Kei, 2 words, but I go by any combination of names. And on Instagram, I'm at Akai Ito Design, where I do a bunch of illustration, primarily inspired by running. But I've been running since I was probably 5 years old. So I'm a longtime lover of this sport.
Oh, yes, this episode features Mikka Kei Ito Macdonald, who is well known for her graphic design inspired by running, and she is a longtime lover of the sport, and she's here to tell the whole story of how running has been a through line in a life that's seen her live all over the world, how it's been a place to find and test her athletic abilities, connect with nature, join in community, and merge her advocacy work and the politics of living in the modern world. But before you hear more from Mikka Kei, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner, and I'm the host and producer of this podcast. Thank you for being here. This is a terrific, beautiful episode. I'm so happy to have Mikka Kei on the podcast. I first learned about Mikka Kei through her graphic design, and I was lucky enough to work with her. She created the logo and the graphic identity for Earth Movers podcast, which I am the producer of. And I wanted to learn about Mikka Kei's running story, so here we are. And yes, Mikka Kei has been running since childhood, and the significance of running has shifted as she's moved, grown, and evolved through life. For Mikka Kei, running has taken different forms, but it's been a non-negotiable part of her life, whether she's had to negotiate with her parents to run as a teenager in Nepal, jumped at the chance to discover the Appalachian Trail with family friends, or challenged herself in marathons and ultras. Running and the space it occupies has also seeped into Mikka Kei's day-to-day. It's become integrated into her advocacy work, community involvement, political mindfulness, and yes, it has informed her graphic design work. Running is something that Mikka Kei considers deeply. And all of this shines through in her story, which is poetic, interesting, and inspiring. So let's get to it. Let's hear Mikka Kei Ito Macdonald's running story from the beginning. Now here to tell her story is Mikka Kei.
I was born in Bangkok. I'm not Thai, ethnically or otherwise, but my folks, my parents, are and were international public health workers. So that took us, my sister and I, to a number of different places. Born in Thailand, but at the time my folks were living in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. But it was soon enough post Khmer Rouge that the hospital systems weren't robust at the time. And so a lot of Westerners and a lot of Americans who were living in the region at the time had their kids in Bangkok. And then moved back to the States, and I bounced back and forth between the States and overseas for most of my childhood. Huge chunk of time, I would say some of my most formative years that weren't in the States were in Zambia. We were in Lusaka, which is a capital city. We moved there, I think, after second grade for myself, and my sister would have been in just after she finished kindergarten. And I was there until partway through middle school. And that's, I was always a relatively hyper and anxious child. I used to joke that, how you have worry rocks that you can paint. I don't know if you've ever had that. You can paint a rock as a child and tell them your feelings. And I just kind of went through multiple worry rocks. But in Zambia, we had a kind of a yearly competition between all of the students, and one of them was running. and it was a cross-country race. And I think it was really about 800 meters long was this cross-country race. But so it was, a big deal. And I had run before and I really enjoyed it. And so I was looking forward to it. And the competition was per grade. And I think I came in third. And then I watched my sister win her grade. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so that kind of sparked a little something in me. I was like, if I had just played it a little smarter, maybe I could have done better. And then we both ended up winning for the rest of our time there and had similar success in turkey trots and, things like that. But running in Zambia was very freeing. I think no matter where you are when you're that age and you get to move your body, it's probably pretty freeing. But after we moved back to the States, I then used running again for like different purposes, going through puberty, being someone who, moved in from out of town wasn't always the easiest, and running was a great escape for me. Lived in Nepal then a little bit during high school with my sister and actually my cousins. Running looked different there because of just different cultural customs, but I would run early in the morning. We were somewhat near the palace, so I would run on, I still remember the kind of slippery cobblestone or bricks that I would just do laps of, because even though I love Nepal deeply and we were in Kathmandu and they have an amazing trail running scene, but there weren't that many younger female runners in the city at that point. I think there wasn't like a set up run club for 16-year-old women. I was recommended not to run, and I was like, I will crumble if I cannot get outside and feel that cardio and be able to use my body that way. So I, struck a deal where I could just do laps around the palace and come home, and that was my outlet. So we made it work. I think especially as an American overseas, I feel like the immense privilege that I have that my passport allows. And I want to go into every space, not also flaunting my Americanness and like pushing that culture upon someone else. And so in Zambia, and then I studied abroad in Morocco in college, I, would cover up as much as I could. And so usually, leggings under shorts and longer t-shirts, or, further post-puberty, I would try and wear baggier clothes so that I was drawing the least attention to myself. I think respect comes up a lot in how I try to travel, and always erring on that side for me. Yeah, it wasn't my role as a sometimes outspoken but sometimes shy 16-year-old to push my American viewpoints on someone else when I was, alone running. And so I was happy to cover up and be as respectful as possible. But it wasn't going to stop me from doing what I loved. I think running has always been a constant in my life, and especially moving around a lot as a kid. I think you sometimes are searching for those constants. I always felt the most myself when I ran, and safest and most whole when I ran. And it's hard not to keep trying to go back to that feeling once you've tasted it. And for me, it was a way to, especially, going through puberty, it was a way to like have some ownership over this like changing body, as we all can relate to. I think, the only time that I would feel that like running has betrayed me or I didn't have a good relationship with it was, briefly during those years, as we're still understanding how women's and girls' bodies react to endurance sports, and conversations around thinking about your body in an unhealthy way would come up, and it took me a beat to move past that. But once I did, I was like, oh, the running has been the same. I have just like changed on top of it. And so I was, I think, better than average as a younger child. And then, if you're good at something, especially as a kid, and you enjoy it, people are going to encourage you to do it again or to do it more. And so that was a natural progression. High school, I was pretty mid. I was, I was doing my best. I was showing up as fast and as whole as I could, but I loved running. So even though I haven't always been the fastest, I think I have always just deeply loved the sport and how it made me feel, even when I had that kind of more contentious relationship with it briefly. And then I ran Division III in college. I went to Bates College up in Maine, and I was also pretty mid, but still loved running. And at that same time, kind of in my later teenage years, we had a family friend who was big into ultra running, and he was still one of our closest family friends in his family, and his son is a big ultra runner now as well, and offered to my parents to take my sister and I out to the Appalachian Trail. And this is when we were living in Baltimore County, to just do some trail running. And this would have been, so I was in Zambia briefly during my sophomore year of high school. And so this would have been either freshman year or junior and senior year then of high school. So 2009. But he would take us out to the Appalachian Trail for the day, and we absolutely loved it. He would pick us up probably around 4 a.m. and it'd be him and either one or two of his kids, and we would be back by noon. And I would just be euphoric for the rest of the day. And he really opened up this idea that running didn't have to just be run as fast as you can, that you could really explore the trail more. And so I loved that. And that relates to being a runner in college, because through college, while I was struggling at the 5 or the 6K, I also still loved this kind of longer, slower trail running. And I didn't run all 4 years in college, partially because it's a little bit of a shitty, 19-year-old. And even though I was told not to run these longer races, I was like, well, who's going to know? Like, certainly more mileage will just be better. I was like, I'm already at the back of the pack. This isn't going to make me that much worse. So I did a 50K when I was 19, I think, and that would have been right after freshman year. And then the next year, I really wasn't very good. But I was like a personality hire, on the team. And I had a conversation with my coach, who was so good and was so patient with me. And I told her that I wanted to run a 50-mile race. And she said, please, absolutely do not do that. And I was like, totally. Yeah. And, of course, I did it. What was probably the dumbest thing was that I chose a 50-mile race that was maybe 45 minutes from campus. And it was also a trail festival that had a 10K race, and there was loops. And I'm running my trail race, being I didn't have Strava back then or anything. I was like, who's going to know? And I hear a voice behind me, and it's my coach, and she's running the 10K race on the same course. And I just died. But we came to an understanding later that, maybe it was healthier for me to just pursue these longer races. And again, I wasn't really that competitive at it. I just knew that I felt amazing when I did it, and I just felt so happy when I was out there. But I tried my best. So I think competitive in that way is me trying my best. But then it wasn't until I think after college, maybe after not binge drinking as much in college, I was like, oh, what a strange, who knew that this could be such a factor? I started getting much faster, and enjoyed that. And especially in the 50K, I think, is my sweet spot. And then I started doing marathons a few years ago because my friend Caitlin Tateshi, who did Olympic trials, and she encouraged me to run Baltimore Marathon. And she said that she had a great time. at Baltimore and that I would enjoy it. Of course, I would like Google her and Baltimore Marathon later, and it turns out that she won Baltimore. So that is also why she had a great time. I was like, oh. But I did it and I liked it. I wasn't great at the marathon distance, but I enjoyed the challenge of it. And then later I would end up coming second in Baltimore one year, which was exciting. But I think and for me now, I've become much more of a social runner. And I've just gotten fortunately faster and faster. I've gotten older. I think that as a lot of women I think have experienced post puberty, getting older, we understand our bodies better. But it's this great sport that as women are continuing to get faster later and later. And I don't think that 40 is going to be seen as like older for a woman to have like a international standard time. I think that is just going to shift as we begin to learn more about how women and our bodies react to endurance sports. So I'm enjoying being a little faster right now. I don't want to put pressure on myself. So I will sometimes lean towards distance over speed. Well, growing up, I thought that the only career that anybody had was to be a public health worker. And because that's all I was surrounded by, I was like, you either go into malaria control or you ask people to stop giving each other STDs. But I was like, that's it. Of course, growing up, you learn that there are more. And when I was in college, I thought I was going to be in public health. And I was working on a project in Maine around lead poisoning prevention in homes and organizing recently arrived refugees from Somalia, the mothers particularly, to test their homes for lead. And then they would then coach the women, being kind of like the center of kind of the home life. They would then coach other women how to test their homes for lead. And I was shocked at this model. And then it was later, or quickly told to me that was just, community organizing, and that was one way to prevent lead poisoning in children. And another way was to change local laws to make sure that, children were protected from lead paint poisoning and, predatory landlord practices that sometimes skirted around inspections and things like that. And I've always worn my heart on my sleeve, but I kind of got into advocacy through that from there, and supported a lot of. I was just probably really annoying in Maine local advocacy, actually. I was hyper. Running would only get so much of my energy out, but I was just really excited and willing to learn as much as I could from people and those amazing organizers in Maine. And so it snowballed. And right now I work at an organization that works to lower poverty in the US. And I've worked in, healthcare advocacy, economic advocacy. It's a lot of economic right now. And for me, the tie-in with running is so clear, but it was only recently that I was able to explain it and put it into words. But, running is deeply small p political. Running is about freedom. Running is about being able to have bodily autonomy and being able to safely access shared, often public land. It's about having clean air to breathe. It's about having like the economic capital to purchase the shoes and the food and having access and get access and freedom and power. You're going to hear me say that multiple times. In the United States, I think about when we're running on trails, we're running, or wherever we run in the US, it's on indigenous land. And what does it mean what does that mean in the grander scheme of our lives? And it's about physically taking up space in different places. And it's also about doing something that's just for us, like us as as individuals, which I think not everyone has the ability to do, and the freedom to do. Like no one is professional runners obviously run for their career, but it costs time and capital for me to run and for many people to run, but it also makes us feel so good, and it is sometimes like our only alone time in the day. It is one of my favorite things about going on doing, I don't know, a 50K or a 50 mile, is that whole day, those hours, all I have to do, the only thing that I'm responsible for is getting my body from point A to point B. And what a fucking luxury that is, and how exciting. And I can get to use my body for all of those reasons. So I think you can tell that I'm still understanding exactly how running and politics tie in together. And I think I sometimes struggle talking about it because they're so interwoven for me. And obviously, like, women like Alison Desir have written fabulously on this. Many other advocates have much more eloquently tied what, like, personal agency over our bodies has to do with having the agency to live dignified lives. And Alison Desir founded Run for All Women. And I first heard about them during the pandemic when they hosted a larger relay and were raising money for Black Voters Matter and for Planned Parenthood. And I, as an adult, I have found like a community in recognizing that there are other people who love to run as much as I do. You know, sometimes that's not always true when you're younger. I feel real kinship with people who just love to run. And then on top of that, learning that there was this community of people, in this case, all women, who also felt similarly about human dignity and economic justice and what access and what freedoms people should have in the United States. And it was so freeing to follow the account, first of all, and to just see people put plainly how issues like reproductive justice and running went hand in hand, how like having enough money to put food on the table and having enough money to have enough food to eat and train for some of these sports went hand in hand. And that just really, in the same way that the lead paint poisoning moment, like organizing for me up in Maine, really opened my eyes to realize that there are just totally beautiful ways of thinking and operating within the world, and that there are people doing that type of work. That's what Run for All Women and meeting the women who are part of that collective did for me. And so we organized a race around a later election to raise money for Black Voters Matter. And I'm not sure exactly what we have like next up on the calendar, but I think the through line is how magical it is to find people who are interested in the same things that you are to the degree that you are, and realizing that I'm not alone. Like, I probably my parents have been taking, I have a photo of my mom carrying me as a baby, and there's I think the sign says no landmines for baby's future or something like that. And it was in Phnom Penh. And, you know, I grew up where advocacy is, you know, just as natural as the air we breathe and the water we drink. And I think especially as an American abroad, understanding like the deep privileges that we have, and yeah, what we do with the power and freedoms that are given to us. And so running is a way that I get to celebrate that, and then advocacy is a way that I get to use that ideally for some greater good, especially right now. um there's signs up. I'm in Washington D.C., and there's signs up in my neighborhood like naming where ICE has kidnapped people. I know people who do not feel safe running because of different immigration status, but just the deep injustice that we've seen come out of the Trump administration, and the dehumanizing has eked into every part of our lives. And running is just like one small example of how we can see it happen in terms of like the freedom to move around safely. And it's also, I think, how I deal with it too. Just like reclaiming, like when I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's like, it's a space for me to just like reclaim my own space, my own body, think it out, connect with people who I wouldn't normally talk to, especially in run clubs. You get, intersection of life, and also get to, life is about having fun and being joyful as well. And it's a way for me to process. Running has then been a way for me to process kind of some of these atrocities while also, enjoying the park, enjoying like the leaves turning colors. I was reading a poem the other day that was talking about, cathedrals of stone, and then, how people make cathedrals of stone, and how like nature, we already have these like cathedrals of trees. And I was thinking of that when I was running on a somewhat hillier section of a trail recently, and you just had like the trees coming up and just arcing over the trail, and the sun coming in, and how like purely majestic it was, and how incredible that I am alive at the same time that these trees are just kind of going on their daily business, and that I get to share like space with them. I think a lot about, and it's cheesy too, but I think a lot about, steering the boat is kind of the metaphor that I use, where none of us are going to live forever, and everything that we have and that we're made of is borrowed in a way. We, the energy that I use to run in the morning, most likely in the evening because I'm hard to wake up sometimes, but the energy that I use to run, where did that come from? You have the, sun giving energy to the plants, giving energy, sometimes if I'm eating meat, giving energy to the animal that I'm then eating, giving energy to the dinner I had the night before. I'm borrowing that energy briefly, and then I'm putting it back out into the world. The body that I get to use right now, I inherited from my parents. It's also shaped by my environment. It's supported by anybody who's ever told me that, or I can run, or given me tips and tricks on how to run, or who have coached me, or who have shared miles with me. Like, that is where that's how my body is right now. And I ideally pay that forward, some of it now, by cheering on and helping other people understand their own bodies and come to terms with their own bodies. But also when we die, that, our bodies just go back into the earth and it gets reused again. And it kind of makes the act of running a little bit less daunting sometimes, when we realize that we're not doing it by ourselves. And so in that sense, steering the boat, like the sides of the boat are my body. The fuel is the food that I'm eating. All I'm doing is getting to use my working body while I can, to have fun with it, to explore with it, to ideally make some positive difference with it, whether it is giving energy back out into the world, on my trail run, or ideally helping the world a little bit in my day-to-day advocacy work. But like, what a privilege it is. My screensaver right now is of Rock Creek Park, which is near me. What a privilege it is to be able to steer the boat for the time that I have. And if someone is to tell you, I want you to run 50 miles tomorrow, maybe that will sound daunting, but it's a lot less scary when you realize you have the gifts and the tools to do it. It makes me feel connected with the world around me. It's just, everything is so fleeting. And I think that is clear. I keep on saying, in these times, now more than ever. But we're in a moment where we are seeing like human suffering online in real time on these grand scales. And like, what a gift to be using our body to try and make something a little bit better. And it sounds trite and it sounds woo-woo, but I do think about that. I usually don't run with headphones, partially because I love just hearing the sounds of the woods around me. And it's also safer. But I know I think about like what a treat, like what are the chances that we live on the third rock from the sun that had all of the right ingredients to be able to produce life, and then I was born, and then I, had Axe born with this passport and born post Title IX, have the opportunity to run and then be in a supportive enough community to be like, yeah, you should run, and not being laughed at for trying to achieve different physical feats and instead being encouraged. Yeah, and how fleeting it's all going to be in the end. And so really trying to savor every breath outside. That's what I think about for hours at a time. And it's so fun to see other people out on the trail, seeing people. There's a Marine Corps marathon recently in DC, and seeing people like use their free will and use their bodily autonomy to push themselves. And everyone is dealing with different things. Everyone is working through different challenges, has their own demons. And like, what a fucking delight to see so many people pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and using the boats, the ships that they're steering. Sometimes I feel like I'm the woman who's, probably too far into a game of beer pong, bragging about how my 50K time is faster than some dude on the other side of the rooms. Sometimes I feel like my relationship running is, I need a piece of paper and I need to just be sitting cross-legged alone under a tree somewhere. Sometimes I feel like my relationship with running is coming up. It's identifying the next, I'm going to say, beer mile or silly challenge again. And it is all of those things for me. It is, in the same way that we all carry so many different aspects of our personality. I feel like running touches a lot of different aspects of mine. So that has always been fun to explore. I think right now I would like to do my first 100-mile next year. And so I'm thinking about really gifting myself the time, because it does take a lot of time, to sign up for more trail races. I'm getting married at the later end of next year. And so the 100 that I'm eyeing, I'm going to enter the lottery for Vermont. And then if I can just do a bunch of 50 and 100Ks before then, that would be fun. And it would be a bit of a shift for me. I think what gets me up to run is getting to see my friends, getting to see the city and see the park. And then a new piece for me, I think, is running on effort and not on time, which has, I think, also made me a faster runner. It means that I finish workouts even when I don't get discouraged when I'm off my split in a workout. And I know that that is still me giving 100% of what I had that day. Instead of just cutting a workout short because I'm not close to my times, I'll finish it now. And I think that's made actually a really big difference. So it's not necessarily being easier on myself. If anything, it's telling myself to finish the job I start, where I think a younger version of me would have started crying and been like, oh, I'm never going to be able to run again. And it's like, okay, well, that was a little dramatic. No, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's next. I love seeing more people becoming involved in the sport. I love seeing more people connecting politics and running together. I think being involved in politics has sometimes a bad connotation to it. And I think we can and should change that, because it's not just capital P politics. People are right to be frustrated with it, but it's lowercase p politics of how do you just be a better steward for all of the things you care about in your community. And runners certainly are passionate, if for anything else. And seeing folks make that connection has been really empowering too.
That does bring us to the end of Mikka Kei's running story on the podcast. Thank you so much, Mikka Kei, for sharing your running journey on Women's Running Stories. I really, really appreciate it. What a pleasure. And also, thank you for making such outstanding graphics for the running world. Also, congratulations to Mikka Kei on her most recent running feats. When we spoke, she told me about how she had signed up for not one, but 2 big races, the Richmond Marathon and the JFK 50-miler. These races were 1 week apart. Richmond was first, and then JFK was second. It just happened over the last couple of weekends, and she absolutely crushed it. Mikka Kei ran a super strong marathon, 3:03. Wow. And then she came back the next week and raced that 50-miler, coming in just under 8 hours. So huge congratulations. Giant challenge accomplished. And very best of luck, Mikka Kei, in getting into the Vermont 100-miler, which takes place next year in July. Now, I know you, like me, will want to keep up with Mikka Kei, so look to the show notes, and there will be links on how you can do that. And that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you coming and listening to women's running stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I'm the host and producer of this podcast. And until next week, I do wish you healthy, joyful, ever-evolving strides forward.
Women's running. Women's running stories.